which I had to Google a lot of stuff about this. I'm not a Tolkien expert.
Who is Gollum? Hello, and welcome to HAZMAT, the only show that just got cancelled after 22 seasons.
That's a pretty good run.
Unbelievable. They don't give shows a chance these days.
Oh, I don't know. That's a pretty good run.
Just like it was just getting good, and it ended on a cliffhanger, and have cancelled it after 22 seasons. I'm Matt.
And I'm Harry.
And this is the monthly thing, TV edition.
The monthly thing, 0.5.
0.5 in a way. October 0.5.
October 0.5. October and a half.
That's right. This is the part of the show where we're going to talk about every TV series we watched in the last month specifically, and whether we recommend them, what we thought about them, and how we felt watching them.
Very angry because some people don't agree with my opinions, and that makes me cross.
You're going to have to start to learn that that's how life works.
No. My opinion's right. It's everyone else who's wrong.
I don't know if the spoilery thing applies here. Probably. We may get into some spoilery stuff here and there, but we're going to recommend these anyway. Some of them are kind of like seasons of particular shows rather than the show as a whole.
Yes, I guess some of it is like it's less spoilery because I guess you've already committed to it at that point.
Yeah, I mean,
probably
you know,
already seen it, but
we've talked about TV shows on here before. We'll do it as how it's gonna work. All right, good. Just fucking watch the video, right? Jesus Christ!
Learn the
Just
law.
watch
Learn the rules. Learn the rules.
For God's sake, we have to do all the work here, and
Christ.
Anyway, first up, English teacher, the classic
teacher,
new comedy from TJ Mack himself.
Teach me English. My wife and my son, they come to my class.
We're big TJ Mack fans in this house. Big Brian Jordan Alvarez fans in this house.
Big proponent, so it's going to be a little biased, but I think we both came to the same conclusion.
Recommend.
Easy
recommend. This was so good. I think it took a couple of episodes to get properly going, but once you get to know the characters and the setting and everything, it really gets on a roll for like the rest of the series.
This is probably the first instance of modern media that tackles sort of modern issues such as like gender identity and like pronouns and mental health issues and all of this modern stuff that people seem to complain about any time it's brought up in any kind of media, but does it in a way that I think is probably the best.
Absolutely, because I think the difference is it's not laughing or making fun of any of that stuff. It's kind of more making fun of the people that don't respect that stuff, but then at the same time kind of a comment on how like there's certain generations that are kind of taking some of it like too far and kind of using certain platforms to like
it doesn't pick a side,
right?
It's like, yes, we'll make fun of the ultra conservatives, but we'll make fun of the ultra liberals at the same time.
Right, that's what I'm trying to say. Yeah, is some of them are taking it way too far to the left and like taking advantage of these positions to
for their own benefit,
seem marginalized when they're not really. And then it's also on the other side making fun of like, you know, there's kind of the conservative teacher character,
the
like
God-fearing,
like like the ones that aren't respecting it at all. And so it's poking fun at all sides here, and I think that is why it does it so well.
It's especially because, like, with a lot of those issues that are tackled in the episodes, and obviously, like you said, there's certain characters that represent one side and others that represent the other. It doesn't specifically side with one of them, and one of them doesn't end up on top in the end and being as seen as the right one. It's like they come to an agreement between the two that's like a nice equal ground that they can both agree on.
Yeah, and you kind of like every character as well. Like even the conservative gym teacher is still a funny, likeable guy. Yeah, absolutely. And they're all sort of flawed people in their own right, all these characters. And so it just makes it for a great balance of, you know, the joke is kind of always on them. You know, I think that's why it works so well.
It's very much a punchline of the fact that like these people live pretty shitty lives. You know, they live in small apartments, or like they're not among like the wealthy elite, and they're not super comfortable, and they're just making ends meet. But they're doing it because they love the profession they're in.
Right, it's a comment on like the importance of teachers as well.
Yeah, like there's a passion there for what they're doing.
Yeah, exactly. Shaping the young minds of tomorrow. Yeah, Evan, the main character, played by Brian Jordan Alvarez himself. Yeah, just a lovely, endearing, multifaceted character here. Like you say, he's got that passion for the teaching, and he's very sort of down to earth, but very can get very like overly passionate about certain things, and that can be at the detriment of like the other people around him, and he can go too far with things.
Real kind of like stubbornness.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. It's a very well written, well rounded character, and for like the first season of a sitcom, that is sort of especially important because a huge part of sitcoms especially is characters, because it's like you're following the same characters in different situations every week, every episode. And so yeah, I think it did so well in landing these sort of there's a main 4 teachers, and then there's the head teacher, and then there's sort of a few extra supporting cast, and then all the students and stuff as well. But sort of the main core of the teachers here are just a fun little group, and the chemistry the actors all had together I felt really developed over the episodes as well. Like I say, I think it took a couple of episodes to land what it was trying to do.
Yeah.
And then after that, once it settles in, it really feels like a proper, like, bona fide sitcom, you know? Which they're getting rarer these days, sadly enough.
I think, like, an important part of the character is that idea of, like, Evan as our lead is, you know, we've got a gay lead. And so he's sort of, like, in touch with a lot of those kind of modern issues, especially around like the LGBT community, but like he's the first one that will sort of start questioning stuff that he's not familiar with. It's like, oh, I thought I knew everything about like these kind of issues, but now there's like new stuff that these kids are having to face as well, and he's the first to kind of be skeptical about it. It's like, is that really a problem? Is that something that like, or are you just making it up to make things easier for yourself? And he's just like a good vehicle to get behind for like, we're kind of, you know, learning about all these different perspectives and viewpoints along with him. It's nice to have like a main character that you can easily connect with, and that's the driving force of the show, and you can easily get behind them. And while you're probably going to disagree on some things and agree with others, like it's nice to have like a nice balanced fleshed out main character like that, where you can sort of question things they're doing but also support things they're doing. And
on that note as well, it's almost a comment on getting older and how times change, but it's okay to go along with that and not always be like against whatever the kids are doing, but kind of recognizing what you can take from it and what you can kind of push back on, I guess.
Yeah.
And I think you know, we're unfortunately in our late 20s now, and you know, I think we're kind of a good age to be identifying with Evan's character from that perspective more than the the kids in the classroom. Yeah, having that kind of, oh man, I feel like I'm getting old now. There's all these new terms and things that I don't understand, but showing that it's okay to make the effort to understand them and not just write them off as the kids being kids.
It's a series that's not afraid to challenge certain topics. Like a lot of modern media, they will very specifically take a side because they are so afraid of audience reactions, and that because they take a specific side, because of that, they end up pissing off like the other side, even in some cases pissing off the side they were trying to appease because they're so preachy about it. But like it's nicely balanced. It's like these issues are important to discuss, and it's important to have a healthy conversation and a healthy argument about like what we should challenge and what we should accept, and at the end we can eventually come to like a common ground that everyone's happy with.
And on top of all that, it's just funny as well.
It's
really funny. Very well written. The comedy's great in it. The characters are very funny and exciting to watch.
And a banging 80s
the soundtrack
as well.
Don't get me started. Just so good.
So good.
Yeah, like aesthetically the show knows where it's at like pretty quickly. And yeah, what Texas. Austin, Texas. What a success that this show is. And I hope it runs for 22 seasons.
Austin translation.
Big recommend for English teacher.
Big one.
Can't wait for season 2.
Hopefully we get some cameos from TJ Mag, his wife.
I can't wait for that. Should we have another qualifier with the TV one of like, can't wait for the next season. This is a can't wait for next season from me.
This is a cancel it now.
Yeah. Next up, Sweetpea. This is a recommend from me. This is a new series I watched starring Ella Purnell of Fallout fame, of Yellow Jackets fame, and it's great. Oh my god! Sorry, I thought I just saw a spider, and it's a big bit of fluff. I'm actually like hallucinating now.
It's not a spider,
and it's just it's a great little series. It's it's kind of a Dexter-esque thing. Of she gets a taste for murder, but tries to kind of have a code behind it of like making sure whoever she kills is a bad person and deserves it. So it's got that vibe to it. But it's a very like, obviously it's a British series, so it's got like that going for it. It's obviously a very different vibe to Dexter, with a similar concept. So yeah, I really enjoyed it. It's well written and it's exciting from that perspective, and it's very tight. It's just 6 episodes, I think it was, and the story progresses nicely and quickly. It's paced very nice. There's a lot of annoying characters in this.
This sure pisses me off.
but that's fitting because the whole concept is everyone ignores her. Like the reason she gets into killing is she's got all this frustration and anger built up from years of being bullied in school, years of people ignoring her at her job, her sister ignoring her, like things like that, like not really having any friends, and all that sort of builds up and comes to a head, and that's sort of where the first episode ends. So yeah, so all the other characters in this are sort of represented as these just like dickheads that are just like throwing the coat at her. Like she works as a receptionist, they're just like telling her to do shit and throwing the coat at her and not really like replying to her and stuff until she gets this newfound confidence after like she's had her first kill, and then you see her like arc through the series of becoming this more dominant figure. So yeah, great lead performance from Ella Purnell here. The detective character that's after her, I fucking hated. They do like a parallel where this detective is also ignored by all her colleagues and no one believes her. She gets onto her pretty quick and no one believes that it's her because, you know, she looks like Ella Purnell. And like, she's not going to kill anyone.
She couldn't kill me.
Yeah.
No chance.
I don't know if you're supposed to also feel for the detective character, but I just didn't. I was like, she was just so whiny and annoying about it. But it's so funny because that's the exact same thing that was happening with the main character was happening with the detective, but for some reason the way the detective is written is doing it in a way more annoying way. So if that's like deliberate, then incredible writing from that perspective. But fuck me, every time she was on screen I was like, shut up. Oh my god. So yeah, full on recommend from me if that sounds good to you.
Next up, The Legend of Vox Machina, Season 3. They made it to 3 seasons, baby. This show's here to stay, and I'm all for it. Easy recommend from me. I think this is the kind of show that was exactly what I needed in specific. Obviously, this series is based on the live play on Twitch sessions of Critical Role and their cast. Group of people quite well known within the voice acting sphere. If you're proper into sort of like knowing who your voice actors are, these are all pretty big names within that whole community. They've came together, started a Dungeons & Dragons Twitch streamed their campaign, and they've done it for like, I think they're on their 3rd one now. And I tried to get into it, but at the end of the day, it is so much content to absorb that it's near impossible. You have to think that like each stream they do is probably a minimum of 3 hours, and their campaigns have upwards of like 100 episodes.
Bloody hell. So like, unless you've been there from the start, like
unless you've like properly done it, it's so hard to get into. Especially when 3 hours is probably like
I'm just going to get into Coronation Street.
Yeah, I'm just going to start from the beginning and I'll probably get
start.
there. Which is nice that this series exists because it condenses everything down into its most important aspects. What you're losing the most of is sort of the in-jokes. There's obviously a lot of sort of recurring gags that happen that wouldn't happen because they're moments between the actors themselves rather than the characters, so it's not sort of canon within the universe. So there's a lot of little gags. Some of my favorites include like the advertising segments. Somehow they've made like their adverts like interesting and like fun to watch.
I'm always impressed by that.
They do like their sponsorship things, and Sam Riegel, who plays Scanlan, who is the bard in the party, so obviously he's very charismatic and very funny. He did like pretty much most of the sponsorship reads, and he did like a lot of like dumb goofy stuff with it, so you're missing out on like those small things that are sort of in jokes in the fandom, but you're getting all of the important character stuff, you're getting all of the important story beats, you're getting a condensed version that cuts out a character that was there for like the first 30 something episodes, but they had to get rid of reasons that we don't really get into, but people will know why that character had to leave. This show does a really good job of sort of capturing the emotion. I think these actors are incredibly talented in the fact that they created such rich and deep and well fleshed out and well thought out characters who have these proper like believable connections between them, and probably moments of like real emotion and sadness and loss, and they're just, for the most part, like in the original, they're just sat around a table talking. That's all they're doing. But you invest in these characters. And the show captures it well, visually, with its music cues and with the reactions, the expressions, and the performances from the voice actors themselves, because obviously they got the main cast all back just to do their characters again. It's stellar. It's some real stellar performances throughout. And what I can appreciate about a show like this is because they're all voice actors specifically, we're getting more media where they're specifically wanting to bring in actual voice actors to voice other characters rather than just letting it be like Chris Pratt and Jack Black all the time.
Yeah.
Because that's a big problem, I think, is that a lot of like people who are trained specifically to do voice acting work are losing out on big voice acting roles to just like big name celebrities. So it's nice to have more media where they're specifically looking to give more work to actual voice actors.
Yeah.
And I think this series in specific, it was the most in-depth in terms of emotion. They get into like a lot of the strained romantic relationships between this group. There's a lot of like the backstory, the tragic backstories that come into play. And I think this was the most focused on the actual sort of emotion that drives these characters and why they've come together in the first place. First season did a really good job of sort of introducing you to the characters in the world. The second one goes more in depth in sort of what their goals, their motivations are, and starts a proper story arc that they leave on a cliffhanger, and it continues into this series. Other than that story arc playing out, having a really good set of villains behind it, it more focuses on I was going to say the human aspect, but I don't think there are that many humans in their group technically. I think only one of them is. But you know what I'm saying? Like
the elf aspect.
Yes. Yeah, the elf, the gnome aspect. It's very much focused on the characters themselves and their struggles and the strife they go through and how the situation they're in is impacting them, but not losing like the significance of like progression and still capturing like some of the moments from them just playing their campaign. So they make a few little references and Easter eggs and stuff that are references to little jokes and stuff that happen between them. But for the most part, it's the performance from these actors that carries this series. And I guess it helps that they're all friends in real life, because obviously they wouldn't be playing a campaign together if they didn't like each other. But because they're all such like close friends with each other and they're all used to working with each other on a lot of projects, it makes it so much easier for them to just put in like a believable, raw, emotional kind of performance. Yeah, I just think it's impressive how you can have so much talent and so much sort of emotion and just all of your performance put into just vocal work and be just as believable as like an on-screen actor.
Yeah.
It's I don't want to say it's a dying art. I don't think it is, but I think it's an underappreciated art.
It's definitely less appreciated, I think, yeah.
But yeah, other than that, good stuff. Very excited for season 4. And also very excited because I think they've already confirmed that they're doing the same thing for their second campaign. So we're going to get another series done in the same kind of style, same sort of vein. And I'm not as familiar with that one. All of the content that I managed to sort of get into was pretty much all based on the first campaign. So there'll be some new surprises.
Nice. Next up, Brassic 6. Impressive for any show to get to season 6 and still be as good as this is. I've been pretty late to the Brassic train, but I've got into it over the summer and it is right up my street. You will have all heard me talk about Shameless endless times on this channel, but it specifically gives me vibes of UK Shameless in that, you know, it's a group of friends and family. It's got that northern comedy vibe to it. It's Joe Gilgan and Michelle Keegan and ensemble of incredible comedy actors, and it's just about them getting into scrapes and jams, and they are often robbing somebody or getting themselves into some sort of hijink or shenanigan.
Japes.
Yeah, japes, all that. And yeah, it's right on my street. It's brilliant. The characters are all they've just got such great chemistry together, and it just makes it so wonderful to watch. And the stories and the episodes themselves are brilliant. So specifically season 6, I do have some issues with it. I think at this point they're struggling with kind of the overarching plot lines. I think the episodes themselves are still really good. You know, the hijinks they're getting into are still so fun to watch, and that's kind of the best part of the show. Whereas kind of the overall, there's a bit of a sort of gangster plot line. You know, they're involved in this sort of crime world. I think sometimes they find it a bit hard to balance that and to keep that involved and interesting within these kind of episodic storylines. And so I think season 6, in terms of that perspective, it's sort of losing that focus a little bit. There's certain plot lines that end up either not very well resolved or resolved very quickly, and it seems like they're kind of struggling to still remember they have to do all that in amongst these like really funny ideas they've got for this gang of characters to do. And it's getting to the point now where every show gets to the point after they've done a few seasons where actors start to leave or like disappear for a few episodes because they're filming something else because they've got popular and they're getting more work now. So this season specifically, Michelle Keegan was missing for a few episodes, and she's been a very prominent character. She's had a lot of plot lines over the few series, and so her presence was really missing here, I felt. But you know, she was off filming another Netflix show or something, I think. So you know, it's fair enough. But on the other hand, it meant they could kind of focus on some other characters a bit more. They focused on Cardi and Carol's relationship a bit more. Ash had an episode or two. Even Farmer Jim got like his own episode in this series. So yeah, it's got to that point now where we've got such a big cast of characters that we're getting a bit more time in these series to kind of focus on each one a bit more. I don't think I've even mentioned, I have mentioned Joe Gilgan is the main character here, and I've been a big fan of him for a long time. Rudy from Misfits, Preacher, This Is England. I've kind of followed his career through the years, and he's as brilliant as ever. But again, he's always been part of the overarching plot lines, and it feels like they're running out of things to kind of do in that sense. But hey, I'm going to keep watching this show because I love it. I love seeing these characters. I love spending time with them. As long as it's on, I'm there. Brassic Season 6, I'd recommend the whole damn show. Watch the first 5 first. I'm recommending Season 6, but you should watch the first 5 first.
Next up, Mr. McMahon. You're fired. That's what he's like. That's what he's like. That's what
I'd never want to be around him.
WrestleMania!
I'd never want to be around him ever.
Oh no, given everything that's come out about him, no, you would not. No, you would not. I've been pondering this.
Uh-oh.
I think in a way, like, it's not really a recommend in the sense that I'm not entirely sure who this is made for. The only way I could sort of recommend this to anyone is just if you're interested in like those kind of biopic true life kind of stories in general, because if you're a wrestling fan, like for me watching this, I didn't really learn much in terms of like the sequence of events that they cover that I didn't already know. Because if you're a proper wrestling fan, you're probably already familiar with like most of the stuff they go over because they're just hitting like sort of the big key moments throughout wrestling history. And then if you're not a wrestling fan, you're probably not really going to be interested in the story of the most prolific wrestling promoter in history. So it's a weird one. It's a good series. It captures all of the most important moments on the timeline. It sort of starts off late 70s, early 80s when Vince McMahon first takes over the company through to present day. The most interesting aspect of this to me is not them detailing the sequence of events. It's like the small sort of personal stories, because that's when you're learning a bit extra and it's fleshing things out. Because you can tell me about like stuff like the Montreal Screwjob as much as you want. I already know how it happened, how it went down, so there's nothing new there. You want to talk about like the Attitude Era, I know what they were doing, what was happening then. But it's like the little aside bits where it's like, oh, I had this kind of relationship with Vince. They even do like a little compilation bit where so many people that they interviewed on this were like, oh yeah, Vince was like a father to me. We had a father-son relationship. Oh yeah, Vince acted like a father figure. He was like my mentor. Like, so many people said that. So like, it's another one where it's quite an objective look at his life and how it's gotten to this. I think it says they started filming a lot of these interviews in 2021, so it was before all of the allegations came out about him. So there's a lot of quite objective stuff, but still people don't hold back about sort of
he felt like a father to me, and he would never do anything bad.
He would never do anything bad. The guy's perfect. But there's still like stories about how people had strained relationships with him, because at the end of the day he was running a business. He wanted to kind of be sort of like a mentor and help these people thrive in the wrestling world and help them be the best versions of themselves. But at the end of the day, if you're causing problems, he's a businessman. He's going to cut you loose. I think the best part of this series is when they start focusing on Shane and Stephanie his two kids, because you start getting the stories and the context of like how they got involved in the business. But even though like they were his kids, they still felt like they had to prove something to him. They felt like other wrestlers on the roster, where it's like, you've given me this opportunity, but now I feel like I have to prove myself and why I belong here. Especially Shane. Like, Shane always felt like he thought to begin with that he was kind of the natural successor, in that he would be the next one to take over the company, and he had all these ideas, and he thought that it was just a foregone conclusion that Vince would go along with a lot of him. But no, he gets a lot of pushback from him. He's like, that's not a good idea, that's not a good business decision. And ultimately Shane kind of feels like he wants Vince to say, I'm proud of you. He wants you to say, like, that was like good, you've made me proud with that, you've proven to me that you know what you're doing. And that's the most sort of interesting aspect of this documentary, is when they get into the family relationships and how they've balanced like the work and family dynamic, in the sense that it's almost two different versions of Vince. It's like Vince your father and Vince your boss, which is a weird thing to think of. It's like, you go to work in any business and like your father is your boss, because there's a weird dynamic there. But then especially when it's on like live entertainment television, some of this they do a lot of stuff as like sort of very coy in their approach to things, in that they don't give full details, but people who know the stories will know what they're talking about. They do a whole bit about talking to Stephanie, is like, is there anything, like any stories that Vince ever pitched that you refuse to do? And it's a very funny transition in that Stephanie's like, yeah, like, I won't go into detail, but yeah, maybe there's a few things he said that he didn't want to do. And then it cuts to Vince talking about the same subject. He's like, oh yeah, I think I had this story where Stephanie gets pregnant and I'm the one that impregnated her. It's like, we didn't do that one. We didn't do that, but I pitched it. He's a weird guy. And at the end of the day, I think knowing the character that Vince portrayed on TV, they talk a lot about the difference between Vince McMahon the person and Mr. McMahon the boss, the character he's portraying on television, and acting as if they're two different things. But one of the big pieces of advice that a lot of people get in wrestling, that the best characters are always the ones that are just yourself, but dialed up to like 11. There is a lot of Vince McMahon in that Mr. McMahon character, and so it's not really a surprise that a guy that portrays himself like that and is okay with portraying himself like that on television ended up doing or being found guilty of doing like a lot of the stuff that he was accused of.
Yeah,
so
makes sense.
yeah, weird one. I think well made, and obviously they got a lot of great minds in the wrestling business, and they're great talkers. I mean, you have to be a great talker to succeed in the wrestling business. It's like 50% of the job. But yeah, all of the interviews are just really succinct and quite objective for the most part. Even though these people had personal relationships with Vince McMahon, I think a lot of them are quite fair in their approach. There's some eye-opening stuff in there, like certain people that get interviewed I've seen in different ways depending on certain stuff that they've said during this. But for the most part, like, if you are a big wrestling fan, you'll know a lot of the content they cover. So it's a recommend in terms of being good. It's a good series, but not in terms of like, it's not what people expected. I think people expected a proper expose on all of the recent stuff, but it's not that. It's sort of like, it's a timeline of his career.
So stuff you already know anyway.
Yeah.
And
just
like
told
say,
in a
like,
more succinct kind of way.
Someone who didn't know or follow it wouldn't be interested anyway. So it's
it's like, you don't need to learn about something you've already lived through.
Yeah. Next up, Ludwig. This is a recommend from me. A nice, quaint BBC comedy this is. David Mitchell's latest, of Mitchell and Webb, of Peep Show, of Would I Lie to You fame. And it's a nice little twist on the kind of whodunit murder mystery detective series. You know, like every episode is a different murder that has got to be solved. It's a nice twist on it because, so the premise is basically David Mitchell plays twin brothers in this, one of whom has gone missing, and he has to impersonate his detective brother to kind of find out what's happened to him and where he's gone. And so he's working in this detective's office at the police station, and he's having to kind of go along and accidentally kind of solve all these crimes and stuff. But because he's a crossword writer, he kind of treats all these murders like they're puzzles and is sort of able to solve them very quickly in very kind of unconventional methods. despite not being trained as a detective at all. So yeah, it's got a good kind of quirky premise to it, and I think it just does it really well. It's just like solid. It's every episode's a different murder. It's fun. They're fun to follow along with, and it's almost one you can kind of try and figure out yourself and kind of see where he's come into it from. It's it gives you kind of all these bits of information and hints and stuff, and then when he starts to explain it all at the end, you're like, oh yeah. So yeah, it's incredibly well written, and it's very funny, and the supporting cast are all great here as well. And I mean, it was probably I haven't looked it up or anything, but this must have been written around David Mitchell. Like,
yeah.
No one else could have done this role. He did it exactly how he does these roles. He's incredibly good at this one thing that he does as the sort of socially awkward, like, nerdy type. And yeah, he nails it again. He knocks it out of the park, and they've confirmed a season 2, so I'm very excited. I'd recommend this. It's a nice, easy watch, despite it being about murder. Yes. It's sort of got that, like, cozy crime is a term I've heard recently, like Richard Osman's new books.
Yes, yeah.
Sort of that, like, it's a murder mystery, but it's a bit quirky.
It's an alternate kind of approach to it. I think a lot of, like, British writing is very, very good at that. Like, you're talking about his approach to solving things and how he takes, like, a different approach to it. And all I was thinking is, like, there's an episode of Paddington I was thinking of where, like, he goes on a game show and, like, almost every answer he gives is wrong according to, like, the host, but he explains why technically he's correct. Like, technically he's correct.
Yeah, that's sort of the vibe here, is he's not solving these in conventional methods, and all the, like, suspects are like, what are you talking about? Or why are you asking this? But then he, like, lay it out at the end, and he's like, it's a logic puzzle.
Yeah.
You eliminate this and this and this, and that means you couldn't have been there at that time, and that means it was you, blah, blah, blah. So he does all this perfectly while having to kind of impersonate his brother. And so, yeah, so there's the overarching story on top of that as well of, will he be found out? Will he find out what's going on with his brother? He's living with his brother's wife and son as well, and there's that dynamic there.
Creep.
They invited him in to help. Yeah, great little series. Solid as hell.
Last up, Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power, Season 2.
We come in peace.
Controversial choice from me, because I know a lot of people do not like this series. It's been received pretty negatively from everything I've seen. I like it. I'd recommend The Rings of Power. I like this series, with a caveat of, like, okay, I understand why people don't like it. The Rings of Power as a series plays very fast and loose with Tolkien's source material. At sort of the bare bones of it, they've taken key events from his writings. This is set during the Second Age of Middle-earth, which I had to Google a lot of stuff about this. I'm not a Tolkien expert.
Who is Gollum?
I don't claim to be a Tolkien expert. I've never been a Tolkien expert, but I know that the movies, the actual story of The Lord of the Rings, is set during the Third Age, so this is before that, and it sort of documents Sauron's rise to power and the forging of the rings, which is where we get the title from. I don't know why people hate this so much. I get that it's like, it's not exactly like how Tolkien created it. They take a lot of creative license with it, but at the end of the day, I think if you did an adaptation that was entirely, completely faithful to Tolkien's work, you'd be watching it all day and wouldn't even sort of had scratched the surface of what's going on. It's like, I think I said to you, this series takes a fraction of his source material, and I'm still having to Google shit to work out what's going on, which kind of speaks volumes about how in-depth and how intricate Tolkien's writing actually was, and how much thought and craft he put into it, which, considering a lot of it gets left behind, I can see why people would be upset and wouldn't like this series based on that. But in terms of the actual storytelling and the characters in it, there's some really enjoyable stuff here. We've got some original characters that have been made just for the series, and then we've got familiar faces that people will recognize from watching Lord of the Rings. We've got younger versions of characters like Elrond and Galadriel. We've got characters like Durin who show up in his writings a lot. You'll have to bear with me because a lot of this will just sound like I'm not saying anything or just spouting nonsense, but that's what a lot of Tolkien's work is. It's just made up words.
Yeah.
And that's something I can get behind and understand why people would have a hard time watching this stuff. Just in general, is a lot of the dialogue revolves around talking about specific characters and places and what's going on. And you have to learn a lot of stuff in a short amount of time and just keep track of place names and character names to understand who they're talking about and what they're talking about and what events are happening, which is, I think, difficult for some people. I know, like, me and my mum are very much the opposite in terms of she can remember like normal sounding names. I'm so much easier with remembering like fantasy names because to me they stand out as like no one else is called that, so that I'm remembering this specific
right
thing.
So you can only relate it to like one thing.
Yeah.
Anyway. Yeah.
It's like I got very confused watching like The Walking Dead because they all have very normal names and like all these characters just blend
They could
into
all be
one.
anyone.
Yeah. A lot of season 2 is based on the lore of how the rings are created. Celebrimbor becomes a pretty major character in this. He's the one that actually creates the rings with the help of Sauron, but in disguise as just like another elf who's helping him. So a lot of this series is based on like lies and deception and how he's tricked everyone into accomplishing his goals.
What a bastard.
Once Sauron gets involved, you start realizing that he's done something, there's some kind of like taint to them. He's using them to sort of manipulate and change the fundamental characters of who these people are that are wearing them, which will come into play when we get around to watching the Lord of the Rings movies. We just haven't. It does open with a nice little summary of sort of events that give you enough context
thank God.
to work out how stuff's going on.
Yeah, I'm going to have to quickly squeeze in Rings of Power season 1 and
Just
2.
quickly shove it in, just so we know everything up until this point. The one gripe I would have is them not doing enough with their original characters. I get that like people are going to be more invested in the stories of Galadriel and Elrond and Isildur, like these characters that we know, but at the same time, because we know that those characters appear in Lord of the Rings, there's no jeopardy in terms of any time they're involved in a battle or a fight, because we know that they appear later on in the timeline. So, and which is why they should have used their original characters more, because there's actual question marks over whether this person's going to live or die.
It's always the issue of prequels every time, is you kind of know where everyone ends up. So
it's very hard to write around that.
Write
around the plot armor, you can't do it. But yeah, like I think where this series excels is in its big action set pieces. The creature design is great. A lot of the fight choreography is really good, especially in like the big battle sequences, which is what Lord of the Rings in general I think is always really excelled at, is whenever they do like a big battle scene that goes on for quite a while, they're always really well done in terms of like the progression of how the battle starts and then how the evil forces sort of get the upper hand, and then we get a nice little sort of twist. A bit of reinforcement comes in, and then the good guys win, I guess. It's had a bit of a mix in terms of that. Like they've had some battles where the bad guys have come out on top, and they've built a pretty good like original villain around that. Because I think one of the things with Lord of the Rings is the villains aren't particularly good in terms of their balance. Obviously, Tolkien being quite a devout Christian, there's a lot of like heaven and hell imagery in his writing. And it's pretty much the villains are just the embodiment of shadow and evil and darkness, and then the good guys are the force fighting against that. But they have a villain in Rings of Power called Adar, who's sort of a bit more mixed in terms of being a villain. His methods are, again, questionable, but his ultimate goal is that he wants freedom and peace for the orcs. He thinks that the way the orcs have come about and been treated by Sauron over the years, he thinks they deserve to sort of live on their own. But his method is essentially, we need to be in a position of power, we need to conquer these places so that people don't fuck around with us anymore, because otherwise we won't get like fair treatment. But other than that, it's been good. It's been good. It's been an interesting series, and I think I just enjoy experiencing that world.
Right.
I just really like the world that Tolkien's created. I think it's very unique, and what Rings of Power does quite well is it introduces things that in the Lord of the Rings books, so I'm sort of familiar with them, but never made it into the films themselves. Stuff like the character of Tom Bombadil and like the Barrow Downs as a location make appearance in this, so there's stuff that we're familiar with, and we're finally like getting to see it on screen, so it's just cool stuff like that.
Yeah.
We get a bit of stuff that we're familiar with. We get a bit of new stuff. We get a bit of original stuff. And I think it just balances it all quite well. And I like it.
It's cool that they're kind of doing that rather than just trying to kind of reboot the films again or something. Like, it's cool that they're adding to the world rather than just trying to do it again.
Yeah, it's a nice balance in that. Obviously, Tolkien being Tolkien, that history is already documented, but they're putting their own sort of flair, their own sort of spin on it, so that they can throw a few curveballs here and there. Because if you're a big Tolkien fan watching it, because some stuff is changed and some stuff is left out, at least you're getting a few surprises along the way. So like I said, if you're just watching something that was completely true to his work, it would essentially just be someone sat down, like recounting the entire history of this world and how it came into creation. So I'd say overall, recommend from me, but make sure you have Google on hand because it does get very confusing with all of the terminology they throw in there.
Well, that's all the several seasons of television we watched in the last month. And mostly good by the sounds of it.
Pretty good.
Mostly good. Pretty good month for TV. TV, I think, is in a pretty good place. I think there's some very interesting stuff coming out. I don't know. I sort of sounded like I was making a point there.
I think TV's in a pretty good place, right in front of the sofa.
It's in a really good place. I can see it clearly.
I can see it. It's not at an angle.
I tried to do some kind of conclusion, and it just ended up me saying TV is good.
But at the end of the day, I think there's probably more good on TV than there is bad.
Absolutely. You know what? People complain about shows going on too long. I say give us more. If a show gets to season 10, I'm interested.
I want to consume this product until I die. Until I bloat and die.
Thank you for watching HAZMAT reviewing every TV series they watched in October 2024.
If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see us do more stuff like this in the future, you can support the channel by leaving a like or a comment. You can hit the subscribe button as well as a notification bell. That way you'll be alerted to all our more recent uploads. And as always, all of our socials will be listed down in the description.
And join us next time where I try to explain to a class of teenagers that back in our day we used pens.
And I'm just going to become the boss of those kids. They're eventually going to work for me. And I'm going to do some heinous shit. I'm going to do some real bad stuff. But I'll pay out hush money so I'll get away with it. The moral of the story, be rich.
Be rich or die trying. 50 Cent. Bye.
Bye.